All right, it's 2 p.m., so I'm going to get us started. So, good afternoon. My name is Natasha Allen. I'm a white woman with dark hair and orange highlights and glasses. I'm wearing a black shirt and I'm sitting in a home office. I'll be the moderator for this workshop titled We Are Burning the World for This, Analyzing the Results of Library Freedom Project's AI and Library Survey. Before we begin, I have a few reminders. We have a code of conduct that we will adhere to for this conference. The link is posted in the chat right now, where it should be. We also, I'll also add another resources portion as well. Please make sure your microphone is muted upon arrival. Questions will be answered by the speakers at the end of their presentation. You may use chat to post your questions at any point during the presentation. I will monitor the chat for them and ask them at the end during the Q&A portion, or you can raise your hand to ask them yourself if you would prefer to do that instead. Additionally, during the Q&A, please wait until you are invited to unmute before asking your question or making your comment. This session is being recorded and will be shared later. This session is also currently being live streamed to a YouTube channel. You can enable captions by clicking on the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen. It is now my pleasure to introduce Tess Wilson and Kay Slater to you all today. Tess Wilson is a librarian and educator with a focus on digital literacy and information democracy. She is the membership and outreach director of Library Freedom Project, and her work was most recently featured in ACRL's Data Literacy Cookbook. Beyond her library work, she is a teaching artist, environmental educator, and zine enthusiast. Kaylin K. Slater is a Chicago-based public library worker and critical information studies scholar. Slater was the winner of the 2025 annual Library Juice Paper Contest for their work against AI critical refusal in the library. They hold an MSLIS from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and a MA in communication from the University of Illinois Chicago. You can follow Kay on Blue Sky at kslater.bsky.social. Please join me in welcoming Tess and Kay.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Thanks for that lovely introduction, Natasha. I'm Tess Wilson. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Membership and Outreach Director of Library Freedom Project.
I'm Kay Slater. Any pronouns are fine. I'm an independent scholar and public library worker, and I'm working right now with Library Futures on the Research Network.
All right. Thank you all for joining us today. Here's just a quick agenda for us today. And we will maybe have time for some questions at the end, but if you want to just hold your questions until the end of our presentation, that would be great, just so we don't lose any in the chat. But feel free to engage in the chat and share resources and talk to other folks who are in the room. So this is our agenda for this afternoon's presentation. We'll sort of set the stage of why we're talking about AI in libraries, Library Freedom Project's stance on AI in libraries, Gen AI in libraries. We'll also talk about some of the concerns that we have about AI and that library workers might be seeing. We'll talk about AI in libraries, and then we'll talk about Library Freedom Project's AI survey initial findings. And then finally, we'll end with some actionable ways that we can move forward. So I'm going to set the stage for us here. The way I do this when I'm presenting with Library Freedom Project is on this spectrum, the reform and abolition spectrum. So we think about this spectrum a lot when we think about AI. On one end of the spectrum is reform. So folks who believe this tech is too valuable to dismantle, that the powerful potential of AI is worth the risks, and they believe we can identify and fix some of the biases that are inherent in this technology, and we just need better data sets and better representation in who creates the tech. On the other end of that spectrum, the abolition end of the spectrum, folks believe that AI issues are structural and that the inherent infrastructure is problematic, the algorithms, the data sets, and many of the uses. And these folks believe that the obvious biases mean that more policing and more data would be needed to fix those or to try and repair some of those harms. I start off our presentations with this spectrum because I want to establish that Library Freedom Project is on the closer to the abolition end of the spectrum. So just framing some of the ways that we'll talk about AI, about resisting AI, that's where we're coming from, just to set the stage for our perspective. I want to just do a quick overview of what we're talking about when we talk about AI, and then I'll hand it to Kay to do a little bit of a deeper dive into some of our shared glossary. AI is an umbrella term. It's used to describe a lot of different technologies, some of which have been around for a really long time. But ultimately, AI is mathematical formulas that ingest terabytes of data and identify patterns or make rules within their constraints using optimization. So AI, as it's marketed today, usually refers to machine learning and generative AI. And these are when complex algorithms are given sets of data that are used with probability models to just generate new content. Most of these are large language models. Ultimately, AI is computing. It is also a social organization, it is a marketing gimmick, and a political project. But to further establish what exactly we mean when we say certain things, I'll hand it over to Kay.
Awesome. Thank you, Tess. First, we want to give a special shout out to the presenters of Monday's session, Critical and Agency-Centered Responses, who have some really great, more in-depth slides and graphics about many of the types of AI products that we'll be touching on in the next couple of slides. But just to get us going, transcription and translation are one type of AI. This includes automated transcription like speech recognition, identification of words and characters and images like license plate readers and optical character recognition, or translation performed by a scripted software application. Other types include classification, which involve algorithms that sort inputs into categories determined by the scripts or applications programmers. You may have seen these operate through grouping photos together on your phone or using data points to identify a customer for advertisements. Next slide, please. Summarization is pretty self-explanatory. This kind condenses large data sets into shorter, quote-unquote, readable output using text generation. Chatbots and assistants are software programs framed to be, quote, conversational and respond to prompted inquiries also using text generation. And agents are bots or other contained applications programmed to run scripts and perform tasks without requiring immediate user intervention or input at every step of the program. This is a pretty big category that the industry is abstract about, truthfully, and is still defining the scope and actual possibility of. Next slide, please. Recommendation uses predictive and pattern recognition algorithms. This type determines itself based on statistical probability of what information to show you based on things like browsing behavior data, and people you have connected with. The decision-making kinds of AI also use the same kind of predictive and pattern recognition algorithms. This kind seeks to automate decisions that are typically mired in human judgment, like loan approval, resume screening, and bail amount setting. This type of automation is employed specifically to expedite the emotional aspect of making consequential and livelihood-based decisions between human beings. And then text and image generation or generative AI products fabricate and synthesize images, video, audio, and text to produce new versions based on the product's datasets and training apparatus. Next slide, please. So how does it actually work? Most of you probably have some familiarity with this, but just to get a little bit more specific, these patterns that our generative AI uses are formed through algorithmically structured comparison and matching schemas that are typically formed through large language models. After massive amounts of scraped and tokenized bits of text are fed into LLMs, the scope of these probabilistic models and schemas are then affirmed by people engaging in high-intensity, low-paying contract work. Any input made by the user, the prompts, texts, images, and other bits of data entered into the application are also fed into the LLM. Next slide, please. So we have some issues of concern, if you couldn't already tell. So we're concerned basically with three categories: how it's made, including transparency, control, data privacy, labor, and extraction; what it creates, explainability, bias, reproducing existing harms, surveillance, and fake information, and how we can approach it. Popular misunderstandings of what AI is, hype, and lack of regulation. So, how it's made. Transparency. AI products, particularly those on the commercial market, are not transparent about how models are trained or the data they're using to train the models. They use rationale like the need to, quote, guard trade secrets from competitors, even when many of these organizations like OpenAI and Anthropic are technically non-for-profit for now. These products are often referred to as a quote unquote black box, meaning that there is deliberate obfuscation at multiple levels of access of both how the products operate structurally, as well as the path it takes to get to those outputs. Privacy, obviously, most of us are pretty concerned with this as library workers. The data implemented into these models are scraped from the open web, including but not limited to social media, forums like Reddit, blogs, and websites, and publications that are both copyrighted and in the public domain. The companies and organizations that produce these products have engaged in a don't ask for permission, just seek for forgiveness model that has them currently tied in many lawsuits, even with each other, like Apple's recent litigation against OpenAI. And then control. These companies are instrumentalizing their non-for-profit but not for the public status to elide oversight while making massive private deals with places like universities, think tanks, and governments on speculative futures, literally and figuratively. So obviously it's a pretty extractive infrastructure. These products use enormous amounts of computational capital, including specialized GPUs and fiber optic cables that cannot be repurposed for other types of computing. The sheer amount of computing power it takes to both train and activate these products burn fossil fuels through electric plants, powering cooling systems, and the supply chain movement required to extract rare minerals used to produce both non-specialized and specialized computational hardware alike. The tech industry itself is extremely opaque about its energy usage, with increasing claims that it will move to more efficient and energy-saving cooling workflows like closed-loop cooling systems after immense pushback from the public and communities where data centers are being proposed, constructed, and built. While closed-loop cooling may save marginal amounts of electricity, if electrical substations are still using gas to produce at any point in the infrastructure, they're still going to burn fossil fuels. And labor. Like I mentioned earlier, data labeling and large language model affirmation is done by low-waged workers in the global south. Other workers like artists, screenwriters, and authors are directly impacted by the utilization of AI products within creative, media, and humanistic industries. Your free labor as well through written and visual engagement on the internet is used to build AI products. So what it creates. The increase of AI products, particularly those that rely on the purchase of data through data brokering markets and capturing of inputs from users, create more surveillance. The content of the data sets being from the open web means that content moderators who operate under similar, if not the same conditions as data labelers must manually affirm or deny the social acceptability of the content being trained. You can imagine that this means three things: that the moderators won't be able to catch everything under their contractor imposed time constraints, the sheer volume means it will be impossible to mitigate each piece of data, and that while the scope of the model schemas may claim they don't accept inputs laden with racism and prejudice, including misinformation, conspiracies, and stereotypes, it doesn't mean that the content is filtered out based on the parameters of what the company deems acceptable to be. And also, many of these people who lead these companies are also eugenicists. They're on or amenable to the alt-right and only do whatever is best to serve their particular profit-based vision. So to get even more in the weeds, I recommend reading the article from Timnit Gebru and Emil Torres about the Tess Real bundle. This is a lot of like really intense terms that are specific to the construction of the tech industry. Just to quickly go through them here. Essentially, it really means we're thinking about how like the industry itself is constructed to be able to move beyond humanity as a whole, including things like effective altruism, which really means that they're trying to get rich for charity's sake, to essentially kind of do so good in the world so that way humanity is complete and then we can all move on and do something else like go to Mars. So I recommend looking at the article. It's very intense. Just to save time, I think we can kind of move on from this, but it's definitely formidable to what we're talking about today. So as you may have noticed, it is becoming very difficult to totally opt out or disable AI-related features within applications at work or otherwise. Another issue at play is these applications' implementation of dark patterns, which are defined as manipulative design tactics meant to keep users on platforms as long as possible. These design tactics include infinite scroll, auto-playing videos, and excessive notifications. In the same vein, chatbots are designed in a way to tell you what you want to hear and are affirmative in quote-unquote responding to you. I don't think AI is known very well for being very accurate. Misinformation and the ability to manufacture disinformation is readily available through the utilization of these products. The affirmative design of these products deploy an illusion of confidence about the bits of data they're representing to you as, quote, information. There is no authorial capacity of these products to produce context, satire, or an understanding of truth, particularly when the sources are not cited. Claims are frequently misconstrued, if barely strewed at all, with ever-increasing opportunities for racist and prejudicial bias in outputs. So we're looking also really affirmatively at AI Now Institute's 2025 report about regulation. They know that there's been a swift and aggressive narrative attack on AI regulation, or the industry has, as well as think tanks. And the AI industry thinks that this regulation is anti-innovation. They think it's superfluous, bureaucratic, and too much friction to kind of move the industry forward. Especially since Biden's executive order about AI regulation, there's been a pretty total reversal in the federal stance about how to regulate or if to regulate AI. But historically, the federal government has supported the tech industry in innovation itself, and the regulatory environment that has existed has been fairly limited. But there are particular ways that we can think about the actual value and supply chain of how the tech industry is like coming into itself into other parts of our everyday life. So, why is AI everywhere? This is a great image to convey how tied up each of these products are and their corresponding owners are. The circular financing means that software products are powered by the semiconductor chips of companies like NVIDIA, which has stakes in the profitability of almost each aspect of the AI supply chain. For example, Amazon will sell the licensed use of models to other companies like Meta to construct their own AI products. OpenAI has cloud deals with most of the big players in the market, like Microsoft, Oracle, and CoreWeave, as you can see on the graphic here.
Right.
Okay.
Thanks, Kay.
Yeah, go ahead.
So now we'd like to think about specifically how AI is showing up in libraries and why library workers are talking about AI. So the last 10 years, especially the last few years, we've seen these enormous advances in AI technologies, which has led to this and is because of this well-funded AI hype cycle that we are part of. The problem is that a lot of popular conceptions of AI are part of that hype. And a lot of people have bought into the inevitability arguments that are part of this hype. And a lot of these misconceptions are often wrong. And a lot of the potential future use cases of AI are often really blown out of proportion. Libraries, as we know, are being impacted by AI, but we also are in a unique position to educate the public. As we know, sometimes libraries are some of the only tech education, some of the only digital access in some communities. So we have a really important position in these conversations, and we can leverage that to have critical conversations about AI and equip folks with the information they need to resist. AI does represent powerful potential, but it also, in the moment, is exhibiting real harms and needs major regulatory guardrails. So some of the marketing of AI, in libraries especially, what we're sold, is that it will automate the boring stuff. So metadata, records, preservation, digitization. We're also sold recommendation tools that are marketed to us, ChatGPT for automating text, chatbots for library reference, plagiarism checking tools. And a lot of library vendors like OCLC and Clarivate are using AI tools and their own data, which is creating a lot of generative AI in the tools that were being marketed. And some of the messaging, what we're being told about AI tools, is inevitability. So AI is here to stay whether you like it or not. You have to learn or leave. We are facing sort of resignation. We hear a lot of sentiment that says we might as well learn about it and incorporate it. It's here, why not learn about it? A lot of FOMO, you'll be left behind if you don't adopt AI tools, to which I say, where are we all headed so fast? There's a lot of unwarranted trust, a lot of you aren't using it right, you don't get it, a lot of people being called a Luddite in a bad way. There's a lot of it's okay because that we hear, some potential use case that justifies the current reality of harms and resource extraction. We also hear it just makes my job, my school, my life easier. And those things are hard. But we want to think critically about the ways that we're integrating AI into our work, into our life, and into schoolwork as well. So this argument that we hear a lot, but what about this hypothetical future use case? And we like to refer to this idea of POSIWID, the purpose of a system is what it does. It's usually invoked to talk about a system that is purported to do one thing, but consistently does not fulfill those promises. And a lot of this can be applied to AI tools that are being marketed to libraries. A good example of POSIWID is imagine that you have a really nice luxury car, but it doesn't run and is in your garage. It constantly needs repairing. So is the purpose of that vehicle transportation, or is it work? Is it working on the vehicle? Is a nice way to think about what POSIWID is, but we find this a lot in AI. And librarians are familiar with this narrative. AI is really just the latest shiny thing. How many other tools have we been told are inevitable, or if we don't adopt, we'll fall behind? And there are a lot of issues with library vendors besides what I mentioned. Some of them are that there's no reproducibility, there's no search transparency. For a lot of reasons that Kay mentioned, these are just not reproducible search results that we get. A lot of user experience and instruction issues, students just accepting the outputs they're given. And a lot of times these outputs, these summarizations that students use are very superficial and often wrong. There are increasingly high costs for the library, and that is becoming more and more apparent as the money drains from other parts of this AI tool cycle that we're seeing. There's forced adoption and really aggressive marketing, whether that's coming from external forces like vendors or internally from admin and other proponents of AI. There are a lot of confused and worried patrons, people who feel overwhelmed. And we're also seeing, in some cases, less interaction with library workers or changed interactions with library workers. We're also seeing new products that no one asked for, like this librarian kiosk that we saw at a library conference recently. It's showing up in a lot of different ways. AI generated slop in collections, people asking for things that don't exist. And there are a few media outlets that are really on top of this, and 404 Media is one. They have a lot of really interesting stories about how AI is showing up in libraries and some of the problems it's causing.
Cool. So we're going to talk about what we found out in our survey that we did for the AI Working Group in Library Freedom Project, which we conducted last fall from September to October. We got over 500 responses in 3 weeks from library workers in all different types of libraries. We wanted to examine attitudes about AI in libraries, worker impacts, patron impacts, vendor products, much of what Tess just said. We found the responses were overwhelmingly negative. They were skeptical and they were concerned. We also found that administrators' approach is mostly hype-driven and uncritical in the adoption, and that workers communicated that there is a huge desire for resources around critical programming, policy, and talking points against AI adoption. So we asked some questions about what folks might be concerned about, and we asked folks who actually just like self-select different multiple choice options and asked respondents to explicate further on any ideas if they had more to say or if they were confused about a certain point of the question. We found that most of these had multiple affirmative responses. So these were a couple that had over at least 70% consistency across over 500 responses about what the concerns were about AI. So it ranges from misinformation to energy impacts to data privacy. The responses in particular that we wanted to sort of segment out for this particular question for the first part of the survey was that folks were concerned with low quality content, long-term impact on cognitive skills, and the use of these machines to create plausible deniability and to avoid accountability from folks within the library, particularly folks in positions of power. We also wanted to ask folks what the impact was on their day-to-day work, and especially on their particular field or specialty within librarianship. And many came up mostly because of folks are going to be across different kinds of libraries and different specialties. But the things in bold came up the most were about plagiarism or student plagiarism in particular, workers' time being wasted, trying to find ways to make AI efficient, people being mandated to attend workshops about AI that weren't pertaining to their job or were useless to what they were doing day to day. There were less interactions with patrons on the whole, and that patrons demonstrated a sense of learned helplessness when talking to staff. From admin, there seemed to be, from admin to workers, the workers communicated that there was lots of pressure to adopt AI just for the sake of doing so, and to push efficiency above all else, to add to workflows that end up kind of taking creative labor away from workers themselves. And we were also curious as well about impacts on patrons and if folks could let us know their own anecdotal experiences or things that they have heard from coworkers about just what is really actually affecting folks downstream of themselves as workers. So again, across libraries, we found that there was less learning by searching. Folks were demonstrating less of an ability to research critically. Materials and citations being fabricated or hallucinated, things just coming up with no actual trail to find them through chatbots. Of course, impacts to senses of literacy, a lot of big feelings, a lot of confusion, alarm, overwhelm, fear. This sense that AI will actually widen instead of narrow the digital literacy gap. Folks are very clear that this was going to create more barriers versus limiting them. And that generally, as we all know, there's like even a lesser sense of an attention span with AI products in the library. And we were curious about vendors as well. So we wanted to actually get some information about how much folks were using tools or products from vendors specifically, as well as other products that were maybe not vendor related, but implemented into a library workflow like a ChatGPT or a chatbot. And we found that almost half of respondents said that there had been some implementation of AI within a vendor workflow or within another application-based workflow. And that basically over half, at the time at least, that libraries did not have an AI policy around even the implementation or use of these products. Maybe this has changed over the last almost year, but especially as ALA's policy has just come out, but by and large, folks did not have any guidance from their administrations about how to go about use or disuse of the products.
One thing that we found in a lot of responses was sentiments like these, people feeling like they were losing their minds at their work because they're the only person who isn't all in on AI. They were happy to find other people who were skeptical of AI, who were voicing their concerns. They were grateful for a place to talk about their issues with the tools that were being implemented in their space. And finally, a lot of sentiments about how AI does not need to be inevitable, but feeling overwhelmed in other people telling them that it was inevitable. So this was a lot of the responses we got. Just joy in finding community of people who were also skeptical about AI, but also, as you can see, this overwhelming feeling of being alone at their institution. what we hope to do with the survey analysis, we currently are using the results of this survey to inform our critical AI literacy trainings, and those are available for all types and sizes of libraries. In the resources tab of this Zoom link, there is this Zoom room, there's a link to that pamphlet. It just tells you a little bit about what those are, those trainings. Please get in touch if you're interested in these, or if you're interested in a session like this for your library. Library Freedom Project members and our community are really happy to provide this kind of information. The results, we have finished our summary. They'll likely be published late this year or early next. We'll keep people posted about where that comes out in publication. And hopefully we see these survey results serving as a foundation for library workers who are advocating for critical programming or AI policy changes, new policies at their libraries. We're also hoping this can provide some tangible and really relevant talking points for library workers as they advocate for these things at their institutions. Okay, so this is a lot of information that we gave to you. What do we do with all this information? What do we do with the results of this survey? Some things to keep in mind about talking to folks about AI. This issue is personal and in a really deep and specific way. I have found, I think because it's such a part of people's lives, I've found that some people are against a lot of AI or against engaging with AI on purpose, but make an exception for ChatGPT or make an exception for some tool, which is a really fascinating kind of relationship to a technology. So just keeping that in mind when we bring up these conversations, whether it's to patrons, our community members, or frankly, our family members and friends, that this is a really sensitive issue in a really unique way. Small steps can help us find ways to talk about AI. Leaning away from anthropomorphizing language, which is really hard because all of the marketing uses things like create or think. But using terms like compute can really help us take one step back from that marketing hype, and can also help us talk about things in a way that might help other people understand and separate that tech. Tech, we have to remember, isn't all or nothing. It's constantly evolving. So as we equip people with this information, this is really just another opportunity to flex our digital information credibility muscles. As I said, libraries are in a really unique position to share this information with people, to provide a balance to the scales where we mostly see AI hype and pro-AI marketing. We can provide some of the critical information that's necessary to make those decisions. This is an idea that Chekhov came up with about writing, but he said we may not be able to solve the problem, but we can present the problem in the right way. And I think that is a lot of what library workers do. And I think it's especially important to remember that that's what we're doing in this situation. We're presenting information that people can use to make decisions. A few notes about opting out as well. There are a lot of reasons why someone might want to opt out of AI or of other technology. They might be concerned about data collection. They might be concerned about what this data is being used for. They could be doubtful of the quality and the accuracy of AI outputs. Some of the concerns might be social impacts, labor usage, copyright, energy use. Maybe someone is just picky about their tech. Or maybe people are unclear about why they would use AI in a certain situation. Maybe they're waiting for the kinks to get ironed out. Maybe people just don't want to use it. There are a lot of good reasons to opt out. And I think we need to keep that in mind as we push back against this hype. Remember that opting out and being skeptical are legitimate responses to new tech. We should take things slowly. We should be thoughtful about how we're incorporating technology into our lives. Some ways we can resist the hype narratives. One bright note is that AI skepticism is growing, and it happens to correlate with how much people know about it. So the more we share about AI, the more skepticism might grow out of that. There was a study in the Journal of Marketing that found this, that the more people know about AI, the less likely they are to adopt it. We can take a publicly critical stance when possible. If your library can offer critical AI programming, that's awesome. Some libraries might not be able to because of their administration, because of they might be part of a municipal system that is really adopting AI at a quick rate. But if you're able to offer that, please do, because not every library is going to be able to do that. You can also come to your conversation with your own talking points that bring things to your community and meet their needs. Knowing your audience, understanding the priorities of your specific patron base. Young people can sometimes be moved by climate arguments. It makes my job easier if that is an argument you hear a lot. We have to take one step back and think about what the systems are that are making your work overwhelming. Is there just too much work to do? Maybe there are some systemic changes that we need to think about before just adopting AI, which will inevitably end up giving us more work. And then think again about this idea of POSIWID. When was the last time an AI tool really worked for you? And finding examples from your community of times that it has not worked can be a really helpful example when you talk about these things. Some other ways we can resist hype narratives. We can demand new regulation, transparency, accountability. There are a lot of bills on the table in several states about environmental controls when it comes to data centers, about putting moratoria on them, but keeping an eye on those bills, on regulation that's being proposed, and advocating for regulation that would really have meaningful impacts on AI. We can approach it critically when we're talking to our colleagues, but also when we talk to decision makers, our admin, again, our elected officials in town. Do folks really understand what we mean when we say AI, what the harms are, and why we're so worried about the impacts on our communities as library workers? LFP offers a lot of trainings. We have resources and community building on issues of tech ethics in libraries. There are a lot of really other wonderful tools as well that aren't Library Freedom Project related. We're going to share some of those too. But there are a lot of resources that are available, more and more that are available that take a critical stance on AI. So keep an eye out for those as well and share them with your colleagues. I don't advocate for this because I tend to abstain from Gen AI tools, but some people have been pushing AI tools until they break, which helps you understand the limitations of these tools and how they work, and then sharing those limitations and when a tool breaks with their colleagues. This is a great tool that some of our community members created through an IMLS grant a few years ago. And this, I won't go through it. It's a little hard to see, but we can share the link to this. But this is a tool that can help you navigate adopting a new tech or a new platform. And it's very thoughtful, and it sort of takes one step back to make sure this is really important and really going to be useful for the ecosystem that you're in. You can also use Library Freedom Project's resources. We have AI talking points for library workers for a variety of stakeholders. We have our critical AI literacy programming menu. We have an AI FAQ, this What's the Deal with AI worksheet. It just gives a really straightforward overview of what we mean when we say AI and what some concerns might be. It sort of boils down a lot of this presentation into a really handy one-pager. We also have a ton, this is just two of them in the right-hand corner. We have a ton of these avoiding AI sheets that are being updated pretty regularly to remove AI or turn off AI functions if possible in a variety of tools. We have this resource, Questions to Ask Vendors About AI. And it is very useful for that use case when you're talking to vendors about how they are incorporating AI into their platform. But some of these questions are useful outside of that context as well. If you're talking to your admin, if you're talking to other authorities in your community or in your library, these are really helpful questions to ask because it really gets to the bottom of why we are adopting this tool and if it is necessary.
Okay, so quickly we can talk a little bit about policy. So as I mentioned before, ALA just put out their AI policy working groups like Final Draft, those passed an annual a couple of weeks ago. I recommend taking a look at that. They have some good frameworks you can explore that are philosophically based and are grounded in peer-reviewed scholarship. You can take a look there. But we are encouraging folks to use informational justice principles when you're constructing your AI policy. Essentially, this just means that information goods and services should be equitably distributed across all members of society and your local communities. That all folks in your community should have opportunities to communicate their point of view and to be able to take part in shared decision making about the provision of access to information resources, and that these resources include fair and accurate representations of all members of the society or community. We also have some resources for folks to take a look at. These are also in the resource list on LFP's website. So if you're curious about titles of books and podcasts to listen to, please take a look there. And there is the roadmap for action from AI Now, which is a report we mentioned earlier in the presentation that goes through just step by step how you can actually kind of combat your sense of maybe fear or cynicism or doomerism about talking with people at work about AI, figuring it out for yourself, talking to admin, talking to friends and family, things like that. We also have some fun ways to offer critical programming. So you can do our workplace AI implementation bingo, which is a good activity for folks you're working with. And again, there are many resources available through or using LFP as kind of a conduit to get to these resources. There are ways you can help to build community within people you know and people you know digitally as well.
All right. And finally, Library Freedom Project offers Library Freedom Institute, which is an intensive critical tech and privacy training. It is 15 weeks plus an in-person weekend, all virtual except for that weekend. And it's offered on a sliding scale from 0 up. This is a great use of professional development funding if you are lucky enough to have that, but we don't want cost to be a barrier for anybody who wants to participate. It's a great chance to think about a lot of the ideas that we talked about in this presentation, as well as just generally Library Freedom Project's core values, how we operate and teach. It's a good chance to meet other library workers as well and just get more involved with Library Freedom Project's community of practice. We just concluded our LFI session for 2026. If you email info@libraryfreedom.org, that's the best way to stay up to date with our next call for applications. And this QR code will take you to a lot of the resources that we mentioned here, as well as a lot more, including Library Freedom Project resources, but also that bingo sheet and a lot of other great things as well. I wanted to end on a note of hope and looking towards a future that we can all be part of. Tressie McMillan-Cottom is part of North Carolina at Chapel Hill School of Information Science. And she says, refusing is actually the more hopeful expansive vision of the future than the one that is telling us that the future is already settled and decided. So a hopeful note as you think about opting out. And that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much. There are some resources in this Zoom call and the resources tab, but please feel free to reach out to info@libraryfreedom.org. Or check out our website. We would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for being here today.
All right. Thank you so much, Tess and Kay. That was an awesome presentation. We have about, looks like 2 minutes left for questions, and we have one question in the Q&A from Charlotte. Do you think that Hollywood's various portrayals of AI perpetuates misinterpretation of AI use and adoption?
Oh, you go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, I think generally, yes. I think part of that question is like, if people can tell that the script is written in kind of a clunky way, or it doesn't feel like I don't know, smooth maybe. Like I think there are tells sometimes when you're watching a piece of content or film or TV show. I think it's harder when it comes to visual effects. I think visual effects have had a much longer history of using machine learning to create, different kind of computational looks and designs and things like that. But I think the writer strike was a very big like point of visibility, I think, for the like sort of the nitty gritty and how the work is actually constructed. So I think it sets a precedent in terms of how people can respond and how an industry responds, particularly that is so also just very profitable itself. So I think it creates a lot of visibility for the workers, but it is can kind of be hard to tell sometimes, like if AI is used or not, unless it's explicit in the director saying it or the actor saying it or things like that in press.
There have been some really great movies lately too. What was Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die had a really interesting and it I think necessarily zooms out a little bit in what they mean when they are talking about AI. So whether or not that's helpful is up for debate. But I think the way that they treated it as a genuine foe in the movie was really refreshing and interesting. Um, I also am really excited about Dead But Dreaming of Electric Sheep. It's Paul Tremblay. I think Paul Tremblay, Paul is his first name, the horror writer and director's new movie coming out. There was an interview with him recently, and his idea for this movie came from the writer's strike. He thought of this concept of sort of this Weekend at Bernie's-esque tale of somebody being transported and operated by an AI system and said, that's too weird. That'll never happen. It's too gross for a company to think of something like that. And then he was part of the strike and researched OpenAI and said, that actually might make this movie after all. So I'm really excited to hear, to see that movie and hear what the discourse is around it. So that's a great question, though. That's really great.
Awesome. Well, we are a little bit over time, and I just wanted to clarify real quick. Are the slides shared anywhere? Somebody had asked that earlier, but I wasn't clear. I know we had some links that were shared in the resources section, but I
Can
wasn't
I
sure.
share the slides after, like, at a later, can I share them this
I
afternoon in this
I
Zoom?
believe you can. I I think you can.
Okay.
But I need to. I would say check with the organizers. I think there's a way to, but I don't know for sure where they get shared to. But yes, I believe you can. So
Okay.
yes.
That QR code, the link is a little ways up. Let me share it again. Okay, here's that link again that the QR code took you to.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording now.
Thanks.
Thanks again, everyone, for attending. And yeah, thank you all. And thank you, Tess and Kay.